what's up, Headspaces? It's your brother VJ from the Ancient Mother, and we are attending to yet another GOAT debate. Hip-hop is a game without a scoreboard, that has been famously said by one of my favorite hip-hop journalists, Just Hunt, and yet we always seek to try and understand how this measure of excellence can be attained. Who's really winning? Who's really losing? Who's been the greatest? Who has influenced us? And who gets to have the title of the greatest of all time? Today I want to talk about one of the most resiliently relevant hip-hop artists we have in South Africa. Now, a key measure of greatness is an artist's ability to withstand the times, because I think by withstanding the times, people get to see the sense that what you have done is you are learning from each era as it evolves. And I mean, that's not something that a lot of artists can do easily. A lot of the times, as people, we are really products of our time. So to be able to transcend your age, your generation, and still be relevant 3-4 decades later must, to a greater extent, be one of these very qualifying factors of what makes somebody great. When we talk about the Nas's, the Jay-Z, the Tupac Shakur, we talk about people whose air of influence can still be felt even outside of generations that they do not directly relate to. So without rambling any further, I'm talking about Tebogo Tekisho, the man known famously as Pro to the Verb. And I'm here to ask rather, is Proverb the greatest of all time? I'm gonna build this argument. Here's an MC who a lot of the misconception around South African rap has mainly been you cannot succeed if you don't rap in vernac. When we count a lot of the people we regard as having been massively successful, a lot of what is a driving force to that success is the fact that they cater to the quote-unquote market of the township. They cater to the mass. They cater to the people who are really in the streets and represent South Africa's largest demographic, a demographic coming from people who do not have the greatest level of education, who are really a reflection of the fact that even in our post-apartheid state, we have still possibly failed our people in many senses, because we still have a populace of people who are divided by a mere language, a language that says if you speak it well, certain doors can open for you. If you can't, so English is very political, and as a result, rapping in English or not rapping in English is more than just a personal decision. It's a political decision. To rap in English means two things. You're offering yourself the privilege of the greater world which speaks English, and to rap in vernac means you close yourself from that to a certain extent. Proverb has been an MC who has dispelled one of these very dominant myths that South Africans do not respond to people who rap in English. Because for the longest time, one of the most dominant perceptions has been that asimo statesmo. And what that kind of translates to is that if you speak, narrate, and focal your music around messages that not directly relate to South Africans, you leave people behind. If you talk about the projects instead of kokasi, if you reference an American bottle of whatever instead of what you know people are consuming in South Africa, there is a direct argument to be made that you are painting a fantasy world, because you're not talking about the things that happen in your everyday environment. Proverb showed us that that is not a matter of the language in and of itself. You can rap in English and still reference South Africa. You can talk about South Africans' lives and paint them with a brush that still is done according to this technique of this global language. Proverb is a South African at heart, born in Kimberley, and I think that's a little bit of a metaphor, because a lot of people, when you think Kimberley, you think the gold, and you think this very humble province that produces a lot of diversity and is also the site of our industrial past. It's a place where the wealth and a lot of the hope and a lot of the traditions of what South African people are about still lingers on. It's one of the few places where the quote-unquote colored black dynamic is able to merge itself into something in between that's absolutely black and absolutely African. Proverb himself can speak fluent Afrikaans and has on many occasions showed us that he could flip it in Afrikaans. So that right there is one of the things for me that makes him special. I think Tebogo could rap in vernac if he wanted to, could rap in Afrikaans, but he chooses to rap in English because number one, it's a political statement that shows that our indigenous thinking does not have to be locked in our indigenous language. Language is fluid. You can translate your Zuluness, your Xhosaness, your Kasiness, ngesingesi. You can flip language on its table and say, I break the rules. So when we talk about Ngugi wa Thiong'o's famous statement of let's decolonize African language, let's decolonize ourselves, let's decolonize the mind. I think Proverb is an MC who has in his dialogue through his first album, straight out the gate, Book of Proverb, shown us that his project is decolonizing the South African mind by showing us that English is not our enemy, but perhaps thinking according to the European pattern is. And thinking according to the European pattern shouldn't be looked at according to these superficial things of how good a person's twang is or whether or not they wear American brands. It's about actions. It's about what you do with your success, with yourself. What do the stories that you contribute towards give back to your people? So let's talk about the actual musical catalog. Proverb breaks out in what is really the peak of South Africa's SA hip-hop birth. We spoke about the years 2005 to 2006. He's one of those artists who, just through being in the Joburg scene and cementing himself in the underground as a battle MC and being on radio stations, really just murdering cats, was able to indelibly set himself apart. Now I know a lot of people have accused Proverb of being a cannabis-like. And for the longest time, I will agree that his cadence, the tone of his voice, his approach to writing, that whole punchline driven narrative of referencing imagery was really, you heard cannabis. But, hear me out, arguably, I want to say that when you listen to the Book of Proverb, you're listening to the birth pains. I don't think it was really the introduction to Proverb. I think it was really like us being able to see what he is essentially trying to do, which I outlined in the beginning, of trying to decolonize our minds, trying to show us how does hip-hop make sense in a South African context. His narratives have always been about where he comes from, how much his love for the culture and how much his balancing act of trying to strike commercial appeal, livelihood, and this integrity of still being authentically yourself is a big part of what rappers go through. Proverb has never fronted with us. He's never given us capitalist fantasies of his own personal success. His music has always been about us reflecting what hip-hop culture is about as it comes from America, what can it be as it lands in South Africa, and how practitioners of the art form can continue it forward. What is being an African? Is it being having a monkey on my back and riding an elephant, as he quotably said? Proverb has always questioned this global idea of Africa as this jungle land of drums and naked people. So he's pointed a finger towards Americans, but he's also pointed a finger at us to say that our modernization is not a sin. Our evolution is not a sin. Being African is not being trapped in a time machine where your ancientness is what defines you. You can be an African and have a cappuccino and a Coca-Cola and like Nike. You can be an African and negotiate with the modern world, with the capitalist system, and try to understand what neo-Africanism is, what post-colonial Africanism is, what everything that has happened through our leaders, from the radical Sankaras to the more liberal Mandelas, is about. Proverb is an informed rapper and is a rapper whose music has always been for the people. And if I'm looking at him according to our 5 principles, I would definitely give Proverb the mass appeal. English or no English, the man managed to navigate into radio stations, mainly because he himself was behind the scenes, but that's another story. Also, the man has been able to give us strong emotional depth. I've just laid the argument for the songs after songs after songs that have showed that Proverb is able to talk about love, able to talk about struggle, able to talk about other rappers, able to talk about himself in hip-hop in a way that doesn't leave behind a general mass of people, and in a way that is able to introduce us to who he is as an individual in the broadest sense. Proverb has also managed to, in his sense of trying to understand how to be a lyricist, evolved from that cannabis archetype. So if we were to actually look at his technicality, if we were to actually look at his originality, I would questionably say that as an artist, he's one of those people who might have began in a place where you could easily identify that this is cannabis light. However, he did what his own influence could have never done. Cannabis is famously known for being one of the most epically disappointing hip-hop stories, because here is an MC who was the greatest of the great, whose legacy is narrowed and marred by the fact that ultimately his inability to reach out to a general mass and his inability to maintain his own mental stability and understand his reputation got to him. So I want to get to the real nitty-gritties. VJ, Proverb is not original. Proverb still is a guy whose style is vested around this cannabis film. The cannabis legacy that follows him around is something a lot of people point towards Proverb not being deserving of GOAT status. I'm here to say to you, cannabis, number one, could never take his vocal register and bring it to a place where he didn't sound somewhat aggressive. He's an MC who I've always argued sounded just way too one-dimensional and angry to really become the GOAT that we all felt he could be. He was stuck in this battle mentality. Maybe it's not ironic that his career died in a battle, because I think Cannabis as an MC characterized himself as a rapper's rapper, as somebody who raps first and foremost to beat other rappers before rapping for the people. And maybe some cats have the right to do that, but I do think Proverb, having kind of come up through that battle scene, was able to give us tracks like Heartbeat.
Yo, my heart speaks in the language of heartbeats. My heart speeds when glad, when sad, my heart bleeds. My heart needs my brain to listen, to carefully translate the rhythms into the mind and paint the vision. My heart can see further than the eye. My heart carries burdens when I cry. It's hard to wear them in a rhyme. My heart has heard of a time when prayer was all it knew. It's like a burglary. My heart's been broken into.
Was able to give us tracks like Microphone Sweet Home.
Yo, ayo, it's no coincidence that my album's dropping on March 4th. Cause I'm a soldier when that is the day that I march forth. The start war, bringing the hardcore into this art form. Using the mic as a dart, industry is my dartboard. My heart pours for anybody who wants to beef. Yeah, I have a soul of a shoe that is cheap, get used to defeat. I spit so many rhymes, I leave you with the bruise in the cheek. Like stethoscope and brought to production, you get the...
Even he had to teach himself how to rap a little softer. How to take what Cannabis did, how to build it and actually turn it into more human. How to actually take these qualities of being able to have a meticulous double entendre scheme and this ability to weave together witty punchlines while still bringing worlds together in a way that doesn't sound like you're always rapping for other rappers. The one thing that I know you arguably can't say about Proverb if you're watching this episode is that he's been rapping for other rappers. Proverb has been rapping for everybody. He has famously always made this statement known, that he is not rapping for the heads. So it's no wonder why today he's one of South Africa's most sought for media personalities in general. Here's what you gotta understand about Proverb. From his Book of Proverb in 2005, manuscript in 2006, rite of passage, forthright, this has been an evolution of a man who decided to always stretch the boundaries. I'm not gonna curse. I'm not gonna rap in vernac. I'm not gonna be rapping for other rappers. And yet, he made great music. And yet, he had enough hits for you if you asked the average South African on the street, or maybe the second average South African on the street, next to the other person, who is Proverb, that have to think a little bit deep, but I'm here to argue that you wouldn't go beyond 5 people and them telling you that they know who Proverb is. And right now, everybody definitely knows who Proverb is, because alongside Somizi and the judges panel, him in those clean-cut suits talking to the rest of South Africa, invigilating talent, is a symbol of what hip-hop can do. The irony about Proverb's career is that his label struggles with Rage, coming out of that, going into Galo, fighting for the ability to be respected from a financial perspective, have his masters, and be able to have the legacy that and musical respect that he requires interfered with a lot of his development. I'd go as far as even saying Proverb might even hate hip-hop today. He's famously clapped back at fans who have been asking him when's the next album coming by telling them there is no next album, he did all he could, and people never gave him the time when he actually wanted to. This is a man who, when he speaks about hip-hop lately, you hear nothing but bitterness, sadness, and regret. And I regrettably, as a fan, feel like I might have played a part. And I'm here to tell you that as a fan that we didn't do enough for rappers like Proverb. And that we're still producing many rappers like Proverb, who might not rap in English, who might still be authentically South African. Will they tomorrow transcend hip-hop and feel like the culture never gave them any props up until they decided to leave it? Is hip-hop the parent that tries to raise us to become like her or him and yet doesn't acknowledge who we want to be? Are heads trapping MCs in a place where the cypher is the only place they can really be good at, and if somebody wants to go further than that, then they're not supported? I don't know. Go to the comments section. But I think Proverb really went beyond the cypher and took a little bit of hip-hop and spread it across the rest of South Africa. And now that more people, everybody in the country probably knows who he is, I am making this argument that after giving us a solid discography, after challenging hip-hop stereotypes, after overgrowing the influences of his style, after cementing himself by going into radio and being behind the scenes from Metro to YFM and working himself to a position where he has cemented himself as one of the movers and shakers in the industry. How on earth can we, as hip-hop practitioners, not look at Tebucho Tekisho and say, that's a master, that's somebody who's shown us the craft, that's somebody we can learn from as hip-hop? How can we not bow and say, you must be the GOAT because you started off wearing those hats and turning them backwards, and now you've got that suit and you still even use your rap name? So that says he has not fully discarded his past. The fact that he still calls himself Proverb is a nod to the fact that he knows where he comes from. He knows that the rap and the hip-hop is where it started. So if we don't know who he is right now, if we want to reject him, maybe I do understand why Proverb doesn't really want to release another album. And I'm here to say, if he ain't the GOAT, then god damn it, who is? It's been VJ, it's been another Headspace GOAT episode. Talk to me, holla at me. I said it and I'll say it over and over again. Proverb just might be the GOAT. And if you ask me, I'd say yeah. And if you say no, holla at me, tell them in the comment section. Don't forget to please subscribe. We need more of y'all to come through and be a part of this conversation. And the only way you do that is if you keep getting those notifications. Be part of this family so that I don't go Proverb on your ass and retire and nothing to do with the Headspace, because heads zikaras abantu. Shout out to Takeza, shout out to South Africa, shout out to hip hop heads. We do this for you. Proverb, you're the GOAT.